world is changing fast. New technologies are impacting how we think about products, services, and the way we live our lives. Nowhere is this trend more present than in financial services, where new business models and customer expectations are changing our conceptions about banking, finance, and the very nature of money. Welcome to Rebank, a visionary podcast about banking, fintech, and the future. The future of banking is here. Hello and welcome to Rebank. I'm your host, Will Beeson. Today we're thrilled to be joined by Leslie Campisi. Leslie is the Chief Marketing Officer of Anthemis, one of the leading Fintech venture capital firms. In today's conversation, we debate the role of humans in finance. It's a multifaceted question with implications for the industry and its employees, the startup and investor ecosystem, financial services customers, and adjacent industries. Leslie brings an interesting perspective to the discussion. In addition to her role as CMO, she also leads Hacking Finance, a Creative Commons run by Anthemis, initially as an annual event, and now including a website and magazine aimed at attracting new views to finance to drive positive change. This is a fascinating question, and one we don't manage to fully answer. What's your view? Contribute to the conversation on Twitter, LinkedIn, or on our website at bankingthefuture.com. If you like today's episode, please subscribe on iTunes or your podcast platform of choice and leave us a review. Thank you very much for joining us today. Please welcome Leslie Campisi. Leslie Campisi, welcome to Rebank.
Thank you.
So it's a pleasure to connect with you in person because in the past, every time we've spoken, it's been transatlantic. You're Brooklyn-based, you were telling me.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Brooklyn-based.
There's a good ring to it, especially in the fintech world.
We do have, is it Consensus? They're out in Bushwick. I haven't been to their HQ, but I hear it's pretty Brooklyn-y.
And I also understand that you, for the Brooklynite fintech listeners out there, run fintech yoga classes. Is that right?
Guilty, yes. Every other Thursday morning, if you can pry yourself out of bed to get there for 7:45, I run a free class for people working in fintech called Finyasa. And you can find out more about it on finyasa.com.
Well, I wish I lived in Brooklyn just for that.
It's on 38th Street, so I wish it was in Brooklyn because it is kind of a schlep up to 38th Street. But that's where a lot of the financy people are. So we want to bring the yoga to where the yoga is needed.
I like that, and I feel like maybe coincidentally that's an interesting place to start with a bit of the personal side, because I think the conversation we wanted to have today was around the role of humans in finance, ? Whether there's a role for humans in finance, whether there should be a role for humans in finance. We have seen with the fintech boom over the past number of years now, effectively great new ways of achieving efficiency, improving customer experience, customer outcomes, saving costs, by deploying technology and generally replacing humans with technology, replacing analog processes with digital processes, and replacing manual paper-based operations with automated software-based operations. So the question is there a role for humans in finance? And I think it kind of pulls in a few interesting strands from your personal experience. Firstly, as Chief Marketing Officer at Anthemis, a fintech venture capital fund, and much more, which you'll tell us about. and also some of the work that you're doing on a new website and magazine called Hacking Finance, which is just about the coolest thing I've come across in the past few months.
Oh, thank you.
And highly encourage everyone to check out. So before we get started, please, quick intro, Anthemis, your role, and then I'll ask you about Hacking Finance after that.
Yeah. So I am the Chief Marketing Officer of Anthemis. I've been in the role for almost 3 years. Anthemis are domain experts and specialists in fintech, or financial services, as we prefer to say. I sort of am running the Anthemis brand house, so all of our marketing and PR activity and our events. But also, I've created a community of all the marketers inside our portfolio companies to be able to work with that group, not just to do my job to promote Anthemis, but also to help all these companies also take their stories and messages forward is awesome. And yeah, hacking finance is kind of the third leg of the stool.
So real quick, before we get to hacking finance, can you just maybe mention some of the companies that you guys have backed? I think we've actually had a couple on the podcast in the past.
Yeah, I bet you have. So we've been investors in financial services as Anthemis for 8 years. Amy and Sean, our founders, were investing together as early as 2008. So that's really early in fintech years. So, some of the companies that we invested in then, I mean, it's really amazing to be able to say we were first money into Betterment. Amy and Sean invested in Climate Corporation, right? That's huge. So a lot of these category creators, whether you're talking about InsurTech or I won't say robo-advising because we hate that term. Currency Cloud has been on your show. It's a really interesting group of companies kind of spread across London, Europe, and the US, all under this, big circus tent of fintech and insurtech.
Yeah. Well, that's it's almost mind-boggling to think about what being the first money into Betterment means, not from a potential return standpoint, but from a being pitched presumably early on, or having a conversation with someone saying, no one's ever done what's now commonly known as robo-advisory, but we think there's a way to, with software, with technology, with automation, with ETF portfolios, deliver wealth management basically to the masses for a super low cost, and then get excited about that, get behind that, and make it happen.
Yeah, I think this ties directly to the theme I know we're going to come back to, which is the role of humans. And I think that in early fintech, and the meta narrative around this is shifting, but automation wasn't always seen as a bad thing. It was seen in many ways as a democratizing influence. So if you have power of financial decision making that's consolidated in a group of people that very few consumers and users have access to, how do you provide them that access? And I think it speaks to, Happy Money is another great example, company formerly known as Payoff, which is another one of their products, Trove. I think what Amy and Sean do a great job of is finding the people who are aligned with our mission, which is to transform financial services for the digital age. And when you're early stage investors and specialists like we are too, the people, the founders are the most important part, because the opportunity space may change dramatically and rapidly. The product and company will most definitely evolve. But if you pick the right people, if you back the right people and build the relationship with them and roll up your sleeves as a really active and hands-on investor, that's the joy, I think, and the beauty of what we do, and why, unfortunately I wasn't around during those early days, but a lot of that team is still here.
Okay, so it's that may be as good a point as any to pick up, because it feels like there's a bit of inherent tension between, I think, what you mentioned, kind of the mission of Anthemis was to transform finance for the digital age. On the face of it, suggests using technology instead of people. On the other hand, you clearly come at this not from an operational financial services background, very much from a more human standpoint. And it's clearly a deep interest of yours, the interconnectedness, the founding teams, the ecosystem that you guys are so active in building. How do you think about that tension?
Well, I mean, this is really the origin story of hacking finance, is similar to what you're interested in and what you hope to contribute kind of to the conversation around fintech. It's it's not just about thinking about what's going on now. Like, what are the implications of what we're doing in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years? And so the Hacking Finance retreat that Sean Park started 8 years ago this summer was really an opportunity to pluck all of these fintech entrepreneurs and other investors and academics and researchers and to come together to have those conversations that you don't get to have when you're really heads down, too busy building stuff.
Just to get people pointed in the right direction and for a bit of context, hacking.finance is the URL.
That's the website.
URL, by the way.
Yeah.
So it's a website and it's a magazine.
Yep, but it started off as an event, kind of the media proposition and the storytelling platform we're building around what at its core is this awesome, very personal, very intimate conversation that happens between people to try to extend its magic to those who can't be there.
I think my initial thoughts in response to this question, is there a role for humans in finance, is kind of to take a step back and think about what problem finance is trying to solve. So, of course, there's an emotional component for anyone who, is currently a bank teller or a middle manager or a chief digital officer or a, credit underwriter or whatever at an existing establishment, be they an incumbent or a new company. But at the end of the day, finance exists to meet a societal need, right? Which is to support business, commerce, allocate resources from areas of excess liquidity to areas of lesser liquidity, and the optimal way to do that is obviously in my view to automate as much as possible. One, because it avoids mistakes, because it's cheaper, because it's more efficient. And it fundamentally solves that problem better. I think where humans potentially come into it are the definition of new concepts, new possibilities that emerge from various innovations, from iterations, from disruptions. And automating more of this makes it easier for people to then come in and plug and play parts in interesting ways, build new business models off the back of modular software-based components in ways that solve problems that weren't possible to solve in the past.
Yeah, I think we're not talking about, this shouldn't be set up as some sort of binary opposition. Forgive me for using a philosophy major term, guilty as charged. You see this framing in terms of the narrative of what happens in financial services innovation all the time. Will the banks win? Will the startups win? Right? It's a game, it's a match that they're playing against each other, and one will be the victor and the other will be defeated. That's the wrong framework. So it's not about, I think, will the machines win, will technology win, or will humans win? The reality is we have humans and machines, we have banks and startups, and they're going to have to both find ways to work together to create the future that we want. So I think it's about finding that sweet spot in the dial, dialing it to the right place. How much kind of automation is too much? I think these are the kind of interesting ethical, philosophical questions of our time, because there aren't any easy answers. And probably the answers are different, today than they will be tomorrow, than in 5 years. And for workplaces and for startups too, as they consider what they're building and how they're building. But when you think about startups and banks collaborating, which now we kind of take for granted, we talk about that now in fintech, we didn't 3 years ago or 5 years ago. That's the conversation I think we should be having about machines and humans too. And, human-machine interaction is a thing.
Hacking finance. Tell us about hacking finance and why it's important.
It's really kind of playing the long game. It's not necessarily about financial returns, though maybe it will be, but it's definitely about driving strategic returns for us. And that's about keeping the people who are innovators inside the financial services industry motivated and feel like they've got a tribe and hacking finance is their tribe. But equally, it has even a more audacious mission, and that's to convince people who think that finance is not for them. And maybe they work in an adjacent sector. Maybe they work in tech or media or government or education or healthcare. They're probably interacting with financial services problems and products all day long, and maybe even building companies adjacent to us, but we've never invited them to our party. So it's for these two segments, as we sort of refer to them internally, are kind of the finance promiscuous. So the people who work in finance, but maybe don't self-identify as finance workers. And that's a lot of people at Anthemis, actually. And the finance curious. People like me, before I started working at Anthemis, who had a very high degree of skepticism that there were, quote, good guys working in financial services, doing real innovation and solving important problems. These people actually exist. There's interesting stuff happening. And if we leave innovation to the people who have always worked in financial services their entire careers, we're not going to solve the problems.
You referenced before we started recording, a panel session that you moderated at this offsite event, which was around the, what was it, kind of a thought experiment, like setting up a financial system on Mars.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah,
Tell us about that and how that links back to this concept of the role of humans in finance.
Yes. So my opening roundtable that I was leading the discussion was finance on Mars. And the assignment given to the, 10 folks sitting around the table was, how do we do it? What kind of financial system does Mars need? And where do we start? What does success look like?
Presumably we extract all the natural resources. We burn, torch the atmosphere, right?
Funny you say that. Yeah, so that was the interesting part. So immediately it put us in this sort of colonialist mentality. It's like, okay, great. So we just go, what's the first financial institution we set up? Like, should we let it emerge organically? Like, what do we do? What do we start with? Barter? How did it start, on Earth? And then slowly we began it kind of devolved into like this Black Mirror writers table. And so I think where we netted out was we shouldn't go to Mars. We should keep solving these problems on Earth and let the Martians figure this out for themselves.
That's an interesting, if provocative, maybe loop back to the topic at hand of the role of humans in finance, because it kind of sounds like what you're saying is the role of humans in finance is to screw it up.
We have screwed it up, but part of it is because I keep talking about these like consolidated power hierarchies. That's what automation starts to unlock. That's the democratizing of finance. We've had several hundred years of rich white guys making all these decisions themselves. So we shouldn't be talking about like the halcyon days of, we're going to really regret it when the humans give up their role as guardians of financial services. Like, actually, a lot of people were excluded. A lot of humans weren't a part of that human phase of building financial services industry.
I don't feel like we're even close to a definitive answer to this question of what the role of humans in finance is. However, it seems to me core to the work that you and perhaps Anthemis more broadly do, and it seems to kind of sit at the convergence of the venture investing piece, the corporate advisory piece, the work you're doing with hacking finance, and the problem that you're trying to solve of transforming finance for a digital age. Because, at least in my view, it's pretty clear that in terms of the operational processes, software can do a much better job than we humans can do. It's just a matter of time before we get there. From compliance to underwriting to origination to onboarding to customer.
But not just the boring stuff. A lot of the stuff that we consider to be uniquely human. You know, I don't know if you're a fan of Jaron Lanier, if you've read any of his books. So his most recent one is 10 Reasons to Delete All of Your Social Media Accounts.
Oh, yes. I read an interview with him recently.
Yeah, but the book you should read is called Who Owns the Future? And it's this real interesting mea culpa from someone like Jaron, who worked in the Valley in the early days and who was a part of a world in which the pace of technology development and innovation was outpacing considerations about why it was being built and what the implications of building it were. And he talks a lot about automation, and he has a phrase called siren servers that he uses. And already,
what's the phrase?
I think it's siren servers, where there are already these algorithms and servers and automation that exists that has the potential not just to automate the stuff that humans don't want to do, but could perform surgery better than your doctor maybe could litigate your case maybe better than a lawyer could. So it's easy to talk about automation in this sort of heartfelt blue-collar context, but white-collar workers better start sweating it too.
Well, I guess that's, you know, maybe the conclusion that I was slowly getting to, which was that maybe the role of humans in finance isn't in anything operational and anything process related, and largely not in anything decision related. See the 2007, 8, 9 financial crisis, the dot-com bubble, the 87 crash, the Great Depression, all of these human-initiated financial crises. Maybe it's in the applying that human creativity to the software-based component parts that we're putting in place now, right? And it's as you're bringing in people to contribute to hacking finance, perspectives that aren't traditionally considered, people working in adjacent domains, how can we expose more people to the kind of great infrastructure that's being built in ways that it can then be deployed to the greater, you know, social good, whether it's, you know, what we're doing on Earth or in the perhaps not too distant future what we're doing on Mars.
Yeah, I mean, let's not forget we're building this stuff for us. It's so, yeah, our job is to ask ourselves, what do we want it to do? What do we need it to do? What do we want it to do? And not to let its own reason for existence start to zoom ahead of and just, you know, innovate for innovation's sake. I mean, I think it's interesting, like the intersection of automation and creativity and art is very fascinating to me. I think the better job for humans is not just to create art if they feel like creating art, but to think wisely and thoughtfully about why we're creating the technology we're creating.
I want to pick up on one of the articles in the magazine, which is, I think it's called "John Stein is Not a Robot." I'm flipping through trying to find it.
Yeah.
So, John Stein, the founder of Betterment, who we've had on the podcast before, and a portfolio company of yours, as you mentioned. If you've got it top of mind, maybe you can summarize it for us. But it's kind of interesting to think about Betterment and robo-advisors, to use this term that you've said you don't like in the context of this conversation, because traditionally, like one of the primary roles that humans have played in finance is kind of like advisors to other humans, because it's like the empathetic component, it's the emotional connection, the relationship, and for a period of time there was this parallel strategy being pursued by Wealthfront and Betterment, and I'm going to forget which is which, but if memory serves, maybe Wealthfront was kind of doubling down on the technology, whereas Betterment was investing in like an advisor network. And there's also this other data point of TrueAccord, who's basically an automated software-based debt collection service that I think through email connects with debtors in ways that humans traditionally haven't been particularly good at doing, i.e. tailors messages that particularly suit the needs, tendencies, emotional states of those who are overdue on their loan repayments, and engages them in a way that encourages higher repayment rates without any of this mafia-style kneecap-breaking debt collection, but very much like connecting with people in human ways who, at the end of the day, just want to repay their loan, right, and get themselves out of this negative situation, and helps achieve that. Basically, replacing traditionally human empathy with machine intelligence. Like these two case studies are interesting to think about in the context of this conversation.
Oh yeah, behavioral finance is huge. How we can move away from the carrots and the sticks and get people to self-motivate, and also to figure out what is going to make them self-motivate to make better financial decisions.
Yeah. And I'm generally of the belief that we can do a better job of that through data and software than we can with emotionally intelligent humans.
Spend a little more time with me. You may.
There you go. Maybe that's the issue. If there were more creative, empathetic types in finance, perhaps we wouldn't be outmatched by.
That's it. That's hacking finance. Yes.
All right, perfect. Well, look, I think the concept behind hacking finance, the articles that you guys put out through the website, this magazine, which again I'm just flipping through for the first time, are clear reflections of this vision of making finance more human in a way that benefits certainly the industry, but I think that enlarges the industry in important ways. Whereas it's no longer like taking deposits and making loans and investments and performance reports, but it's much more the behavioral components, some of the emotional components, what the political, social, and demographic implications of money and our interactions with money, and what it all means for not just one industry, but all industries and all people is phenomenally compelling. It's unique yet not isolated, I think. I think there are other examples of people getting this message also and exploring it in fun and interesting ways. And frankly, I'm looking forward to continuing to explore this topic, which I think is so unbelievably relevant. I mean, it's kind of tough to imagine that 20, 30 years from now, we won't look back at an archaic financial system run by rich white men that got us into all sorts of global financial debacles and didn't fundamentally work to the benefit of the society that built it and that it was meant to serve.
Yeah, and the irony of having a print publication for a company that's dedicated to creating a digital world isn't lost on us. And I think it's a good reminder that the decisions that we make as innovators inside financial services have real world impacts. And I like the idea of keeping hacking finance on your desk, being able to touch it, being able for it to just sort of sit there on the shelf to remind you of that as you touch these pages, let it remind you that there are real world implications for the decisions you make. I think that's powerful. And it's a little contrarian, and we're a little contrarian.
Leslie, where can people find out more about Anthemis and connect with you?
Yeah. So Anthemis.com, that's, our homepage, and you'll see that tagline, "We cultivate change in financial services." That'll hit your eyeballs right away. And you could read a bit more about what we are up to. For hacking finance, like you said earlier, it's hacking.finance. I would check out the web content. Also, we do some emails. So we do a weekly email called If You Read One Thing that is for financy folks, but it's taking a story that's outside of our media world, maybe something that we might not consume, and bringing it over to try to connect some dots and think about how it applies to what we do. In fact, one of our most recent If You Read One Things was about the makers of Joule.
The most recent, I think.
The most recent,
the other day.
Who talk about not thinking through the implications of the technology you're creating while you're creating it, and getting millions of teenagers addicted to nicotine. But hey, that's
they're worth $15 billion or whatever. So
that's
obviously they were right. The market doesn't lie.
Perfect example.
Exactly.
Perfect example.
And it just drives home, I think, these points we've been making.
Yeah. And if you're interested in attending our retreat, we do run an application process. So we did that last year for the first time, because I think it's important for us to add some, people who aren't a part of our ecosystem, but who want to be a part of it into the mix. So if you go to hacking.finance/apply, you can see how to apply to come to Maribel.
Very cool. Leslie Campisi, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning into Rebank. If you like today's show, reach out. Follow us on Twitter at Rebank Podcast and join the conversation. For more on banking, fintech, and the future, check out our regular content at www.bankingthefuture.com.